So, Tim, let me talk first of all about El Alamein. You were there for the anniversary. What was striking for you about the scene that you saw? What did it mean to you when you were there?
Well, I think the first thing is the scene of the cemetery. We have about 8,000 graves there. It's a little bit of an oasis in the desert, so to speak. It's very beautiful, it's very peaceful, it's very calm. But you stand there and think about what had been happening 75 years before, the complete turmoil and of a huge battle going on around you. And it was such a crucial battle, coming at a time where we really hadn't had much luck in the previous couple of years.
Well, Churchill said before Alamein there wasn't a victory, and after Alamein there wasn't a defeat.
And broadly speaking, that's true. It was a huge turning point. It was the turning of the tide in favour of the Allies. Of course, it happened more or less at the same time as the Battle of Stalingrad after Hitler had invaded the Soviet Union. So the tide was turning in both theatres, if you like, against the Nazis. I think one of the most important things for me about this particular year's event at El Alamein was that in the past there have been separate services, separate events at the Commonwealth Cemetery, at the German Cemetery, at the Italian and the Greek cemeteries. This year we combined those into a single service, and something like 30 nations laid wreaths on the Commonwealth Memorial at Alamein, including the Germans, the Italians and the Japanese, and that sent a very powerful message to me.
You mentioned the work of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, which many people will know of in a sort of general sense. They'll be aware that it looks after the graves of those who were lost. What to you is the function of the Commission and its importance?
The function, in simple terms, is to look after the graves and memorials of the 1.7 million or so Allied Commonwealth, mainly soldiers, sailors and airmen who died during the two world wars. And we have a remit to do that in perpetuity. Churchill said in a great debate in 1920 that people will be gazing on our stones and memorials as far into the future as the Tudor period is behind us. And that's what we intend to do.
There's something else about it too, isn't there? It's not simply the protection of these graves. It's the perpetuation of the memory of what they mean.
Yes, it's paying tribute to the courage, the bravery, the sacrifice of the individual servicemen and women who died in those conflicts. And we are very proud to do that. I think there's another aspect as well, which is it's sending a message to people today and in the future about the cost, the human cost of taking nations to war, and that's something we should never forget.
You talk about never forgetting. What does Remembrance Sunday mean to you?
It's an opportunity to pause for a moment. We lead busy lives. We race on from one event to the next. But to come together once a year to stand in silence for a few minutes, to remember what people did in those previous conflicts, not just the two world wars, give thanks to them and think about what it means for us.
It's interesting, isn't it, that although the First World War is now a long way behind us, it's 100 years since Passchendaele and the awful events there, the Second World War is slipping away to the generation that's now in adulthood, and yet there is still an enormous amount of interest in what happened to people, and an interest in the holding of those memories in families, for example.
I think part of the reason for that is the sheer scale of what happened in the two world wars. The loss of people, the impact on families and lives was enormous. And we look back on those two periods with fascination and horror, I think. There are so many stories for people to find out. And incidentally, it's easier and easier for people to find out nowadays what happened to their forebears who died in Alamein or at Passchendaele or wherever. Our website makes it extremely easy to track names down.
And if anyone goes to the First World War battlefields, for example, in northern France and in Belgium, it's always very striking how many people are there who are grandchildren or even great-grandchildren of those who fought in those battles and perhaps were lost.
It was always the intention that the cemeteries would be a place where wives, sons and daughters and descendants could go and pay tribute. In fact, the reason why Sir Fabian Ware, or one of the main reasons why Sir Fabian Ware started the commission in the first place, was because he learnt from the soldiers that they were conscious that they might die. What terrified them was that they would die and nobody would know where they were, and their families wouldn't know what had happened to them. So he was determined to overcome that, and he did it brilliantly.
And no one was ever visited one of those cemeteries, let's say in northern France, from 1914 to 18, can fail to be moved by the atmosphere that there is in these places. And the sheer scale, of course, is part of it, but it's more than that. There's a kind of peacefulness and a spirit of contemplation that's very, very striking.
Well, I think there are a couple of elements in that. One is the superb decisions made by the first members of the Commission, including Churchill and Kipling and Lutyens, to create these enclosed cemeteries which engender that atmosphere of peace and serenity. I think the other thing is the brilliant work that the people who work for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission do to maintain that atmosphere, to maintain the standards of horticulture. The gardens are very beautiful, the trees are very beautiful, to look after the stones and memorials, and I'm extremely proud of what they do.
Finally, it's remarkable, isn't it, that the events that are taking place at the Cenotaph this Sunday are still a moment for pause for really the whole country, right down the generations, that it's not fading away.
No, I think that's right. Sadly, neither of the two world wars were the war to end all wars. Wars continue, much to our regret. Sunday is an opportunity to remember not just the two world wars, but victims of all wars. And I think it's a fitting moment for us all to just pause and reflect and give thanks.